It's so psychedelic. Like, what's the influence from that?
I've taken quite a lot of psychedelics.
And that's changed the way you write sober.
Yeah, kind of, once you've opened the door, you don't need to keep picking the lock, do you? Once the door's open, it's open, isn't it? Once you've sort of, once you punch that hole in the wall, it never closes up, does it?
Yeah, never be a virgin again.
Say what?
You can never be a virgin again.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but also I found that in my 20s, when I was smoking lots of weed and taking loads of psychedelics and doing acid, ecstasy, coke, speed, every weekend.
Just pick at least one or two.
No, you get a little cocktail going in your blood. It's kind of
A wild time that I
take you 2 weeks to get it fully in your flow. I do that sort of every weekend, and I smoke weed pretty constantly. And I found that I didn't need a psychedelic outlet. I didn't need to express myself with art because I was completely satisfied all the time. My brain was entertained. And when I stopped taking drugs, I went a bit mental. I hit the wall and sort of slid down it and didn't want to take drugs anymore because I got into a bit of a state and I was hearing voices and stuff. I thought it was probably the drugs. I've got to stop doing it. So I stopped doing it, but then needed an outlet for all this sort of mental energy. Needed to sort of stimulate my psychedelic sensors, and so I started making music instead. So it's instead of, I didn't make any music all the time I was taking drugs recreationally because I didn't need to.
Gotcha. So stimulating.
I'd have my studio, I do that thing. I'd have some ecstasy and a couple of joints and sit in the studio, get a loop going and listen to it for 4 hours going, well, that's great. And then switch it off and go to bed because I didn't really have the need to finish it. But then that's not good enough when you're straight.
Yeah.
It's that thing where you're kind of easy when you're tripping, you're so sensitized, you're easily entertained. And we've all seen the guy rolling around on the floor with the little snowstorms, full of water, full of glitter.
Yeah.
And you shake him and we've all seen the guy at a party going for hours, staring at this thing, because you're really easily entertained when you're tripping, aren't you?
Yes.
Just staring at a leaf will do it, won't it? Wow, look at
Doesn't
the
take
hands on this leaf.
Impressing sober people is much more difficult.
Yeah, exactly. So impressing myself when I'm straight is really fucking difficult.
Yeah. So that's what you do with music now.
Yeah, that was and I'm not taken any drugs in 10 years, probably more.
Yeah.
About 1998 I stopped.
And that's when you started writing music?
Yeah, that's when the music started coming out. Huh?
Had you had a background in music before?
Yeah, I was a sort of freelance engineer producer.
Okay.
I worked in studios from about 9. I was in a band in sort of late 80s, terrible band. And then that broke up and I went to work in studios.
You're British and you're in a band? I can never imagine.
Yeah, everyone.
People there are into music?
Everyone's in a
I thought
fucking
everybody
band.
plays outside the sunshine.
Everyone's in a fucking band at some point over there. Went to work in studios and just sort of, I was doing alright actually, a freelance engineer. I was earning £1,000 a day. Working with all sorts of brilliant people and spending all my time in windowless rooms mixing fucking Pepsi commercials and dreadful indie bands and just shit. Terrible.
Obviously
music.
you didn't find that fulfilling.
It was awful. The more money I earned, the worse it got. So I hurt my back, couldn't work. I damaged my back, fell over on a concrete floor, couldn't work for 2 years. Just laid on my front, listening to the radio for 2 years, waiting for my back to heal. And kind of that sort of put pain to my engineering career really, because once you sort of fall off the map, you're only as employable as your last job. And if your last job was 2 years ago, you're basically starting from the first rung again. And I didn't feel like it. I knew what I was working towards. If I work really, really hard and kiss all the right asses, I'll end up mixing Pepsi commercials again, or MTV stings and shit like that. And so I decided that I do my own thing.
How did you get the shift into the music that you're writing now?
I've always, I don't know, all my friends ran trance labels, psychedelic trance, and so I thought, well obviously I've got to make psychedelic trance, because that's the only way I'm going to make a living out of this, is by making, so I sat down and I did a load of really awful psychedelic trance, and got a load of it released, and it was absolute shit.
Was that under the name Odd? Have you always
No,
been-
that was under a very, very secret name, but I'm not going to divulge. Because you're only
Fair
going to
enough.
find it. And
Fair
it's all
enough.
like, yes, I'll pay you money to keep that quiet. No, it's all popped up in places, it's no big secret. And it's, I listen to it quite fondly now, but it's psychedelic trance, it's bullshit by definition. And so that was becoming more and more soul destroying. I wasn't doing it for love, I was doing it because I wanted to make a living out of it.
And you felt that was marketable.
Yeah, all my mates run trance labels.
Yeah.
Dragonfly and LSD and Twisted, and because I was friends with all the Twisted lot. And so one day I just sat down and, right, I'm going to do something for me. I'm just going to make a bit of music that I like and not play it to anyone. So I shut myself in the house for weeks and just worked on a bit of music that I really enjoyed, with the intention of never keeping it a secret, never playing it to anyone. And one day Simon Posford came round for a visit, just popped round for a cup of tea, we were chatting.
Better known as Schmongo.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
And because he lived down the road and we used to see each other quite a lot. And he came round and I had some music playing on a CD, just quietly in the background, and I went for a shit and left him in the sitting room sort of rolling a joint and having a cup of tea. And this track came on that I'd done just for myself. And, oh fuck no, someone's hearing my secret track. Oh God. But I couldn't run in there with my trousers around my ankles, shit all smudged over me. I couldn't go in there and switch it off, so I just sort of had to sort of wait there. And he popped his head round the door and said, "This is brilliant, what's this?" "Oh, it's just something I did for some fun." "Oh, I want to release it." So he released it on Twisted on a compilation, and that was a track called Summer Settler, which went out on Backroom Beats in about 2000, I think, 2001. And then I did another 30 of them and just kept doing them. And it's just, I discovered that what I like doing, naturally, people like and buy.
Now your stuff, like from what I've heard, a lot of it has kind of a reggae influence, as far as the tempo and like the offbeat skank and stuff like that. Where did that come from?
10 years of concentrated cannabis abuse.
Sunset was the first.
Yeah,
I like that.
I do, I still like it
It's one of the
now.
best.
It needs beefing up to be able to play it live though. It sounds a little bit weedy down the bottom end when compared to the later stuff, so
I like that a lot.
I need to get that back out and beef it up a bit so it works with the rest of the set. But when you're really stoned, not much music works really. When you're really, really stoned, there's not much that doesn't get on your tits. And what really doesn't get on my tits is a fella called Scientist, who was King Tubby's protege.
Yeah.
And in the 70s and early 80s, he released a series of albums themed around, really loosely themed around topical sort of cultural memes of the time, like Star Wars and Space Invaders and Heavyweight Dub Champion and Scientist Rids the World of the Evil Curse of the Vampires.
That was a good, great cover.
Gene, they're all really brilliant covers, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I bought them all. They're all on Trojan or Greensleeves, can't remember which.
Trojan.
I bought them all on really heavy vinyl because I like the covers. And just fell in love with it and just listened to these 4 albums just constantly on rotation. And he's a poet. He's just the most incredible artist with a recording studio, with a mixing desk. A mixing desk, a delay and a reverb and a tape, and he just builds these incredible sound poems. And it's just, all the others, they're kind of good. King Tubby's kind of good, but a little bit rickety, and U-Roy and Augustus Pablo and Lee Scratch Perry, they're all sort of good and it's all lovely, but there's something about those Scientist records that no one else captured. It's just technically pristine, but it's kind of organic too, and it's just there's nothing to not like about it. It's perfection. These 4 albums, and so I just listened to them on rotation and smoked prodigious amounts of grass, and it just sort of ingrained really. And my sister was big into reggae in the sort of 80s, and I sort of absorbed it from there as well. But it's not like I'm trying to be, I'm not trying to be a reggae artist. I just absorbed a bit of it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of the flavor, but it's not the whole thing.
Yeah,
right?
it's a sound and it's a movement that I like, but it's not something I stick slavishly to.
Your tunes right now, like what platform are you writing and what software?
Everything.
You just a little bit of this,
Cubase,
a little bit of that.
Logic, Reason, Ableton, Melodyne, everything. Because I'm a bit nerdy about it, and I like to stay current with all with all of the software. It's fascinating to me, and also because different things are better for different jobs. Like a Les Paul is good for heavy metal, and a Strat is good for blues, and a Gibson's good for, you know, different guitars, different instruments are good for different things, and different software is good for different things. So for writing the germ of an idea, Reason is brilliant because it's really immediate, it's self-contained, and it's really stable and doesn't fall over, and you can get an idea going really quickly, but then it kind of runs out of scope and you need something. Okay, so then I stick it in Ableton, I'll export it all into Ableton Live, and then you can fuck with tempos and rhythms and grooves, and then once you've got it in there, Ableton's great for being able to bend sound around into different shapes and tempos and rhythms and stuff, but it's not very nice to mix on. The mixer's a bit shit, so then I export it and stick it into Nuendo, which is great for mixing.
You find exporting out of Ableton, if you just export stems or individual tracks, you find it doesn't have the sound that it does if you do your mix down in Ableton.
It's not the sound, it's the ergonomics of it. I don't like the mixer, I don't like the faders, I don't like the... There's things that I like about Cubase, that you can trim faders with the mouse wheel, with the scroll wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
You can trim values with the, and when you're mixing, it's just really quick.
Yeah, really fine adjustment.
But really quick, and you can be really immediate with it. And I just like the way it is. I like the way it sort of moves.
Gotcha.
I like what it does. So it ends up in that. But I always mix things on my mixer anyway. I don't mix in a computer.
So what do you do inside the box versus out of the box?
All the stuff. The computers are brilliant at certain things. For doing impossible things. Things that you can't do in the analog domain. Fast edits, cleaning things up, making things just sort of arranging, just things that are solid. And there's the difference between mixing in a computer and mixing on a mixing desk is a bit like the difference between cyber sex and real sex. Cyber sex is just masturbating at a webcam, and if you sort of shut your eyes and if you're desperate enough, it's almost as good, but it never quite gets there, does it?
Yeah.
Whereas getting your hands on a mixing desk, it's tactile and it's immediate and it's warm and it's...
Because that's how you learned originally.
Yeah, I started doing this when it was all tape and mixers and wires and stuff.
So in your studio at home, what kind of mixing desk do you have?
I've got a 64 input Soundtrax Solo. Soundtrax is an old English make.
Okay.
Popular in the 80s. Kind of, they're now called Digico, and they make digital live mixers. Different company.
What other kinds of hardware do you use?
I'm kind of well known for going to people's studios and looking for the dusty junk in the bottom of the rack.
The duck flow.
That never gets used. I go into other people's studios and look for the stuff with dust on the knobs.
Yeah.
Do you ever use that? That's a piece of shit. Want to get rid of it? Yeah, how much? 20 quid. Okay. And I pay 20 quid for it, and it's a bet. 20 quid's nothing, so you take this thing out of the rack, you get it home, you plug it in, and every piece of equipment has got one killer sound in it. And it might only have one killer sound, but it's a killer sound that no one else has got.
Okay.
Everyone's got Eventides, everyone's got Lexicons, everyone's got the same plugins.
So you're a fan of sounds that are really unique and original.
Yeah, every piece of equipment does something that nothing else does.
Yeah.
And it's finding it.
Yeah.
And if you give me an effects units are my thing. That's what I like. I like synths, but I can get by with one synth. But effects units are what really turns me on.
Do you have some favorites like that you have in your studio with external hardware units?
Well, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. I've got a collection of Delta Lab Effectron delays, which is a delay, just a really mid-market mono delay unit made in the 80s. And there's about 5 different versions, and they all do good things. They all do different good things, but in the early 80s, it's a really interesting time for studio equipment, because it was just as analog was reaching its peak and then digital was in its infancy. And so analog and digital were competing back then. In the sort of about 1983 was about the time when things got really interesting. And if you were making analog equipment, you had to make it quirky in order to compete with the digital gear, which was novel. People were impressed. How old are you?
I'm 33.
And how old are you?
34.
So you kind of missed that. You were, my 80s is your 90s. I'm 10 years older than you.
Yeah.
So in 1983, if you were releasing analog equipment, it had to be quirky and interesting because digital equipment was coming along and it was novel and people were fascinated by it. In the 80s, it was all about digital's coming, oh my god, and everything digital was interesting. But the digital gear hadn't settled in, they didn't really know what it was supposed to be, and so there was some quite eccentric digital equipment coming out, and there'd be a digital delay with a control voltage input for the delay time.
Okay.
And you'd never find that these days. You'd never find a voltage input on a digital piece of equipment. So you get all these weird hybrids of old technology and new technology, and where voltage meets digits is a really interesting place because you can make digits do stuff that 128 discrete steps MIDI can't do. MIDI's kind of boring. MIDI's very reliable and stable and convenient, but really fucking boring. It doesn't do anything interesting, it just faithfully relays commands. Whereas voltages you can fuck with. You can, if you've got a good source of voltages, I've got a Dover modular synth at home which just fires out voltages in all kinds of weird shapes all day. And if you can control digital things with analog voltages, you can get some really, really odd stuff going on.
Do you mean sending like LFO modulation parameters out of the synth?
Yeah. So if you've got an analog LFO that sticks out a sine wave voltage like that, if you can modulate something digital with that, that starts getting interesting. So I've got all manner of analog to digital converters and digital to analog converters. Equipment, I look for CV inputs. If it's got control voltage inputs, it's interesting to me. And there's a whole raft of digital equipment from back then with CV inputs, because that's what things had back then. It was pre-MIDI, 1980, 81, 82.
So you've got just loads of hardware in your studio.
But it's all shit. It's all stuff I've paid £20 for.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
It's interesting and it's charming, and every box has got its. It all does something brilliantly. Does one noise brilliantly, and that's what I use it for.
It's about knowing what that thing is.
Yeah, finding it. But that's the fun bit. You buy a piece of equipment and then spend 2 hours abusing it and see what you can get out of it.
Yeah.
Put it to its extreme settings and then stick a control voltage in the back and see what it does.
Wow.
The other thing about control voltages is you can drive things. So you might have a delay range knob on the front and it might go from 10 milliseconds to 500 milliseconds, and there's your delay range. But then you stick the voltage into the back and give it an extreme voltage, give it 30 volts, and it might go to 1500 milliseconds. You can make it operate way beyond its front panel capacity by giving it extreme voltages or giving it a reverse polarity voltage, and all of a sudden you've got something that goes to nanoseconds, and then you go. And you can make it do extreme things with the control voltage that you can't do with the knobs on the front. So the killer noise might be hidden to everyone else.
Exactly.
Until they plug something.
Nobody's ever discovered it.
Maybe not. Maybe someone has. I don't know.
Well, I doubt it. Or if they have, they haven't published their music because nothing.
And if you've got
sounds
5
like
of
what you
them,
produce.
if you've got 5 of them, you can connect them all in series. Jesus. And because they're £20 each, you can get 5.
How do you not do drugs and write music?
You don't need to. That's the point. I'm a dad. I don't need to do drugs anymore. Nothing I ever take is ever going to be remotely as psychedelic as being a dad. Nothing's going to be as rapturous and blissful as being a father. There's no point taking ecstasy now because it's going to seem kind of second best.
Yeah.
Compared to being a dad, and it's the same with the music thing. You know, I mean, I probably will take drugs in the future, but I don't have the burning desire to because I've got another outlet for all that kind of brain activity.
Do you have a son or a daughter?
Daughter.
How old is she?
Nearly 5. She'll be 5, but the day after I get home.
Think she'll be a musician?
She'll probably end up being a policewoman or something, or an accountant, or anything that I'm not, because that's what kids do, isn't it?
Yeah,
they react against their parents. She does. She loves playing in the studio.
Yeah.
I give her a synth. That's the other thing about analog synth is children can play with them, and she will. I put the headphones on her, and she'll sit and do that with the knobs and
just mess with it.
Yeah, and loves it. Really, really loves it.
Well,
and loves coming in the studio and pressing buttons. I always give her a button to press or a knob to turn when I'm mixing.
What's her name?
Daisy.
Daisy.
Yeah, she's brilliant.
Fantastic.
She's 5. She's just started school. She can count to 100, and she corrects me on my grammar. Which is brilliant because it wasn't long ago she was incontinent and screaming.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden she has opinions, which is mind blowing.
Very cool.
I love it. That's the only thing I don't like about touring. It's being away from her, but you know.
How long is this tour for you?
4 weeks.
Yeah. Do you tour how often? Once a year? Or?
Twice a year.
Yeah.
I do one in spring, one in fall.
Yeah.
That's such a waste of a good word. Autumn is such a lovely word. Autumn, autumnal.
Yeah,
I love the autumn. No, fuck
Autumnal.
it.
I've never heard.
Autumnal.
I like autumn.
Autumnal.
Autumn.
Summery, wintry, autumnal. Springy. Don't think there is an adjective of spring, is there? But anyway, yeah, 2 tours a year, and that pretty much sort of pays my way.
Yeah.
And then I do festivals in the summer.
Festivals in Canada,
In America,
US.
Canada, and all around Europe, Hungary, Finland.
Do you have one amazing festival story? If you just got, do you have one?
One amazing festival story. The first time I ever did live sound was at Glastonbury in front of 50,000 people on the Pyramid stage. That was pretty fucking amazing.
Wow.
That was my first ever Glastonbury in 1992, and I bumped into everyone I knew, and every one of them gave me drugs. And I got really fucked up and had a brilliant time, actually.
Wow.
An absolutely amazing time on my own at this festival, 170,000 people.
Do you find anything different playing for like a crowd of like 50,000 per se as like compared to a club of like, you know, it's just like a...
I'd much
maybe
rather play to
100.
200 people that I can see than 10,000 people that I can't. I don't. The big gigs I don't really... I enjoy them, but I'd much rather play a little place.
More intimate vibe.
Yeah, much. I mean, it's just so much nicer. You do feel a bit... The bigger the stage, the more removed you feel. And sometimes it can feel a little bit... You can feel a bit detached. I like to be able to see everyone.
So one thing I wanted to ask you is that, like, one of the reasons why I'm wanting to shoot this interview with you is I run a video blog. I'm an Ableton trainer.
Right.
And I have a lot of students that are just getting started, you know, they're just trying to find their sound, they're learning, they're on the internet just watching tutorials and things like that. And yeah, I'm just wondering what kind of guidance you might have for somebody who's getting started.
What, with Ableton?
Not with Ableton specifically, but just getting started into electronic music.
Don't get hung up on the equipment, I think. Don't get hung up on plugins and equipment. You can make a brilliant record on 200 quid's worth of software and a ratty old PC. You don't need equipment, really. A lot of people get really hung up on the equipment. Have you heard of a website called Gear Sluts?
Yeah.
And it's just full of wankers all boasting about their mic preamps. And you can guarantee none of them make any interesting music because they're all too busy online blowing off about their fucking mic preamps. And so I get so many emails. So I got an email from a guy. Have you heard of a thing called Fanbridge?
Yes, I have.
And so on my Fanbridge account, I get questions from people, and I answer them as honestly as I can. And a guy said to me, "Can you tell me what equipment I need to make a song like The Queen of All Everything?" And I was just so depressing, such a depressing question, because it's the implication being that it's the equipment that makes the record. You know, whatever you do on a fucking piano, people make really good music on a wooden box with wire stretched across it. It's not the equipment. The equipment is largely irrelevant.
Now with your stuff, like your production has a certain sheen, a certain quality to it that I don't often hear with producers. What are you doing with that stuff? How do you achieve that?
It's 20 years as a freelance engineer, I suppose. And what am I doing? With the greatest respect, it kind of reminds me of the Queen of All Everything question. What am I doing? I'm turning knobs until it sounds good. I don't know what I'm doing, to be honest.
Do you think somebody, for example, just using Ableton could achieve that sound?
I couldn't. I've tried mixing in the box for years and years and years and years and years, and I've never managed to make something that I've been satisfied with. None of my records were ever, every single thing I've ever done has been mixed on a cheap mixer with bad cabling and a load of cheap, shitty outboard.
So you've really focused on developing your ear and with what sounds right to you versus what equipment or techniques or whatever.
It's hard to say because if you gave me long enough, I could probably do what I do on the barest minimum of equipment. The equipment's largely irrelevant. It's down to not stopping until you're happy with it. It takes me 6 weeks to mix one of my tracks.
One single track.
Yeah. There's a track called Neon Tetra that I released under the name Umbaloid. It went out on Andrew's label. And it was recorded in 4 days and then took 6 weeks to mix. Yeah, it's just not stopping until you're happy. That's it. And settling for nothing less than perfection.
6 weeks to mix a track.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Or as long as it takes. I've never known one take less than 5 days. Even the easy ones.
What does a day look like for you in the studio?
Chaos. I don't do days in the studio, I do nights.
Okay.
If I try and work days, it doesn't work. I start about midnight and finish about 9 in the morning, and it goes in about 4 minutes. And then I go to sleep and do it again.
Do you have a studio in your house?
I don't have a studio at all at the moment. I just rented 1,000 square feet of industrial unit, and I'm building a proper studio with a drum room and everything
Gotcha.
at the moment. Because I keep losing my studio, I keep renting little places, barns and sheds and things off people, and then they sell their house and I have to move out. And I'm sick of that, so I've just rented somewhere permanent, taking out a lease, 5-year lease, and I'm building it from scratch.
Cool.
From the ground up.
How much of your sounds are recorded?
And in terms of
Like stuff that you've had like a session drummer in and do that, or traveled somewhere and recorded, like where
all of
the
it,
sounds come
everything.
from? Everything's all original
Everything.
recordings.
Oh no, I mean I use some samples that I find places.
Yeah.
I don't. Not everything's bespoke. I just pull whatever. If it sounds good, I'll use it. I don't really give a shit where it comes from. I honestly don't care. If it's interesting, it goes in, and if it's not, it doesn't. I pull my friends in, stick them in front of a microphone for a couple of hours, record them, just throwing stuff down, and I might use 20 seconds of it. I'm really wasteful with sound. I throw away so much sound. Every one of my tracks is probably about 40 gigabytes when I archive it. And most of it doesn't get used. 99% of it ends up on the cutting room floor. But that's,
Well, in that way, you can just take the really choice selected
Yeah,
sounds
exactly.
you have, right? You have an ear for what you want to incorporate into the final piece.
And if it isn't brilliant, if it doesn't if it doesn't earn its place in the arrangement, then it goes.
Yeah.
If it isn't brilliant, you can switch it off and find something that is. And a lot of people, I hear a lot of so-called electronic music where people seem to have settled for something that just fills the space
Yeah.
and doesn't really do anything special.
Well, that's what I'm hearing from you, is like your commitment to quality. And
Yeah, that's
the amount of
everything.
time that
I
you
only release an album every 4 years. I'm not trying to be prolific.
Yeah.
And considering how long I've been doing it, my catalogue's pretty small. But it's quality, isn't it? I'm not doing it for anyone else, I'm doing it for me. I don't really give a shit what you think of it, and I don't really give a shit what you think of it. I don't really give a shit what anyone thinks of it. I'm doing it for myself. That was the lesson I learned with Somerset. That if I do it for myself and don't think about what anyone else thinks of it, then I do good things.
Yeah.
And if I worry about what other people think of it, I do bad things, because I'm trying to double guess everyone's taste. And I can't do that. I can only satisfy my own.
It's actually really good guidance, because I'm tons of students that I work with, and most times, like 8 or 9 times out of 10, they're coming trying to find out how to sound like Skrillex or Dead Mouse.
Fucking Skrillex. I don't know. No, the other one used to be Tiesto or Daft Punk. I used to hang around on the Ableton.com forum.
You did?
I'm not telling you what my name was. You probably told me to go fuck myself at one point, and it wasn't Bounce before you asked. And so many people would join, and their first post would be, "Can you tell me how to get the Daft Punk sound?" Just want to take you into a dark room and hit them with a rubber pipe.
Do you think there's any merit in modeling other musicians' sounds to learn? Like to learn synthesis or something? Or
Yeah, as long as it doesn't end up sounding like them. I'm always doing that, but I'm not picking obvious people.
Yeah.
So every one of my songs, there's a sound from an ABBA record, or a sound from a Carpenters record, or a sound from a King Crimson record, or there's a sound from a soap powder commercial I heard on TV, and there's an interesting effect there. But actually setting out to clone somebody else's sound, I think, is a little bit. It's kind of defeating the object.
So next time I listen to DJ Autumn, I just have this insatiable, urge to wash clothes.
I'm not a fucking DJ. Okay?
You're referenced somewhere as DJ Odd.
Well, then, if you find out who fucking wrote
Yeah.
that, I'm going to stab them in the eye with a pen.
Oh,
So, my favourite joke of all time, two DJs are talking and one says, do you want to come to the cinema tonight? The other one says, I don't know, who's the projectionist? I'm not a fucking DJ.
Good.
I
That
don't
would clarify
think
that.
like a DJ, I don't work like a DJ. Occasionally I do DJ gigs, but only because it's fun. I have no technique whatsoever and I just play my favourite records one after the other with no thought for how they cross each other. DJing's really good fun. I'm like the psychedelic wedding DJ. In fact, I do play my friends' weddings and I love it. And when I get home, I'm playing a party for 25-year-olds. It's my daughter's birthday and she's having a party in the local village hall and I'm going to be the DJ and I'm really looking forward to it.
Nice.
And it won't be like tonight.
No. Do you ever teach people how to write music?
I don't think you can. I don't think it's possible.
Do you ever have students though that you met?
A couple of people I do, and I do audio consultancies, and generally it's people who can afford it. Fly me out to wherever they live, and I go in their studios and essentially make a track with them, and they absorb techniques that way.
Walk them through how you would
Yeah,
do it.
exactly. They like my stuff and they can afford to pay me to come over for a week and do it and show them how it's done. And there's no secrets. It's not like there's any proprietary techniques that I use that, there's nothing that I do that isn't common knowledge to anyone else that's been doing it.
Yeah,
For a
obviously you
while.
have a
But
long
because I've got 20 years...
history of experience.
Well, I've been a freelance engineer and I've worked 18 hours a day solidly. One of the greatest teachers is doing stuff, is working with other people's music. Because when it's someone else's song, you don't actually give a fuck about the song. You're not thinking about the composition. You're not thinking about the arrangement. You're thinking about the sonics of it. And if it's a total load of shit, if it's dreadful nonsense, the only way to get any satisfaction out of your working day is to try your best to make it sound good. And I've polished so many turds. Paid to polish turds to satisfy people's vanity. You learn techniques for making bad drummers sound good, and you learn techniques for making weak bass players sound solid, and you learn techniques for making poorly arranged instruments fit together. A lot of mixing is arrangement. If your arrangement's good, the mix just falls together.
Right.
And if your arrangement isn't right, there's no point in starting the mix, because if the arrangement isn't right, it's never going to sound right, ever. And you do learn techniques for making badly arranged songs sound good, because otherwise you're going to get to the end of your working day feeling like a dick, feeling like a failure. So you sort of develop all these kinds of techniques for polishing turds. So when it comes to mixing something that you do care about, you've got all these little techniques that you can use. So if you get it, it's a bit like athletes that train with backpacks full of bricks on their back. They go running with 50 pounds of bricks on their back, and when they take the backpack off, they feel light as a feather, don't they?
Stellar.
Yeah, and it's like that. If you spend 10 years recording and mixing really terrible music, and 90% of what I did was total nonsense that never saw the light of day, and that's how studios stayed in business in the 80s and 90s, was recording terrible music that no one ever heard. Only 2% of anything that got recorded ever got heard.
Yeah.
Most of it was just no hope dreamers, and there's so many of those about. And recorded so much dross that occasionally a really good band would come in, and you'd find, fucking hell, I can really do this. I'm really good at this. And you realise that when you get some good source material, all those techniques you learn making bad drummers sound good, make a good drummer sound amazing.
Fantastic.
And it's a really good training. I say go and be a freelance engineer if you really want to learn how to do it, but you've got to spend 10 years recording terrible indie bands. It's probably not, you don't have to. But I don't think anyone's born with an affinity for studio equipment. I think you have to learn it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's not like singing or playing the guitar. I mean, you have to learn to play the guitar, but I think some people are naturally predisposed to being good at certain instruments. I think the lucky people find their musical tool of choice early on.
Do you play any instruments yourself?
No, terrible. I'm a mediocre drummer, an alright keyboard player, and that's about it.
Yeah. I noticed in your live set you were using some Chaos pads,
Mhm.
the little Chaos Later and
The obvious thing after
KP3.
failing as a musician.
The touch screen.
Because you can just lunge at them and they never sound wrong.
You use them in your tracks too?
Yeah, and actually not much. A little bits and pieces, but they don't actually sound that good.
Okay.
They work live.
Do you mean quality-wise?
Yeah,
or just-
there's nothing really. I love the idea of the Chaos pad, but actually it's flawed. There are a few design decisions that I don't really understand. But live it works really good. But in the studio it kind of, when you really subject it to close scrutiny, it's a bit thin, it's a bit scratchy, it's a bit rubbish.
Gotcha.
I've used it on certain things, but it kind of ended up not getting used very much.
Cool. In your live show, you're using Ableton. Do you have things separated out into stems, or are you playing mainly stereo mixed tracks? Or?
Don't play any stereo mixes, it's all stems, and so they're split into 4 stereo stems: drums, bass, music 1, music 2.
What would be
Music 1 is
one?
music 1 is rhythmic stuff, music 2 is lead stuff, so all the vocals, all the lead lines, they're all on music 2.
Gotcha.
And all the sort of chops and the rhythmic sequences and stuff, the background stuff, the sort of the body of the track, that's all on music 1. Bass, and then drums and percussion and everything.
And then you can mix those live on your
Yeah.
ABC40.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first 4 favours are just that, and then they're split into scenes as well with follow actions.
So you use follow actions every 8 bars?
However long the section is, 8, 16, 32. There's no point in splitting them into too many scenes.
Yeah.
So if I want to, I can rearrange on the fly, and then there's always a section in every song where the follow action's switched off, so when it gets to that, it just loops indefinitely. And that's when I can cut loose and do some stuff.
Okay.
And I could, if I wanted to, completely take the arrangements apart and build the song in a completely different order, but actually I rarely bother, because it took me 4 weeks to build that arrangement on the record, and I'm unlikely to do a better job spontaneously on a stage.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I ended up with that part after that part after that part after that part, because when that part comes after that part, there's a, whoa, that's a really nice bit where it changes, and you lose that. A lot of people get a little bit preoccupied with how live their live set is. There's a lot of people just playing stereo files and miming with a MIDI controller. There's a lot of people splitting everything up into individual instruments and turning their MIDI controller towards the audience, so the audience can, I'm actually doing stuff, look at me. And they're all a bit self-conscious about it, and really the only people that give a shit about any of that are the beard strokers at the side of the stage, the other DJs that are standing there watching what you're doing, and fuck them, they didn't pay to get in, did they? They're on the guest list. Who gives a shit what they think? I certainly don't. All I care about are the people out there that pay to get in, and if they're dancing and smiling and having a good time, then it doesn't matter what the fuck I'm doing, to be honest. There are some very surprisingly high-profile people I know that are just playing stereo files and making it look like they're doing it live. I've just recently switched from PC to Mac.
Good job.
And I've been using Dell PCs on stage for years and years and years. And I'd shut up, I know. Every 4th gig,
He's trying to prove that it's possible.
the ASIO driver would suddenly skip out halfway through, and because it's Windows, you can't just hot plug it. You've got to shut Ableton Live down. Sometimes you've got to reboot Windows and fuck about. And so I just thought, oh fuck it, I'm going to go and buy a Mac. So I bought a Mac Pro one morning in Houston before a gig. Just went out and bought the thing and used it on stage 3 hours later, and it worked first time and hasn't skipped, hasn't missed a beat since.
Yeah.
And now I resisted it for years and years and years. And
But you were just saying you were waiting for Jobs to die.
yeah, I wait for that motherfucker to die. Now he's dead, I'm going to buy his products. I just thought he was a smug twat. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing that I was buying his shit. Now he's dead, I'm going to buy it. I've got an iPad, I've got an iPod, I've got an iPhone, I've got a fucking MacBook Pro.
All decked out.
Yeah, I'm all appled up, and I've been resisting it for years.
Well, it is, reliability. That's what I find. Is when I'm performing live, if you're using computer, anything,
Yeah.
it needs to be reliable.
I like the whole concept of core audio and core MIDI. The MIDI and the audio are at the centre of it. Everything's built around that. Brilliant. And I did a little experiment. I set my live rig up exactly as it would be for live. I started it playing, and halfway through a song, I just pulled all the USB and Firewire cables out, and everything went boom. And so I plugged them back in. Didn't even hit stop on live. Plugged them all back in. It went and carried on where it left off.
No way.
Yeah. Okay, I trust it. And you try that on a PC. Try that on Windows.
No.
You even think about it, it might
It would
crash.
take you 10 minutes just to get the thing to restart because it would be so hard blocked
Yeah.
that you'd probably have to hold the power button for 4 seconds and force quit the whole thing.